Most hardcore. Some of them talk, but lacking in character. How can I relax when it's theft of innocence? The harmless are broken. Oh, what tragedy to meet death with the lost word unspoken. Hide it behind the foundations. Charity constructed house of euthanasia. Architects of house of cards remain hidden behind one noble cause. Extravagant facade masquerading as God. I don't buy it at all. I like the real thing raw. I tell the whole veil off. The lights on or off. I get mine either way. The stellar man in effect. I'll leave you free and breathless like true psychedelic acceptance. Worldview becomes transcendent. This midnight smoke is so high octane, paralyzing the presence. Hello everyone and welcome to This Week in Tyranny, the most hardcore news show on earth. I am your host Conrad Rogas. Today is Saturday, January 13th, 2024. It's episode 58 and I'll dive right into it because it's late Saturday night. And I just want to get through this. It's going to be a long episode. And this episode will be about the government raid on a farm in Pennsylvania. Real quick, some key concepts that I'm going to touch on to keep in mind because it's going to be a long one. It's going to go through many different things. Number one, food confiscation is the big deal, is the reason I'm making this. Food confiscation, where it comes from and what it's going to lead to. I'm also going to talk about bringing to light a downhill parasitic pattern in every industry. But I'm going to focus on a specific industry, and it's dairy. So I'll be talking about dairy. And in this episode, show, once again, the hidden ruling class of humanity, showing how inherently weak and incapable they are, and demonstrating through example how to be the opposite of them, to be an integrated and free and loving human being. So the main story here is on January 4th there was a raid on Amos Miller's farm in Pennsylvania, in a town called Bird in Hand, Pennsylvania. And already I have to do a symbolism analysis because it's named Bird in Hand, and of course that's a reference to the saying, a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush, which is a proverb that warns against taking unnecessary risks, meaning that it is better to keep what you have rather than risking it to get something better, but ending up with nothing in return, right? So it's the idea that if you let go of the bird, it'll fly away. So you want to grab two birds, but you already have the one, you should just hold on to that one. And the connection here is, the symbol here is that this is what the wonder of life and its principles are. They are like that bird in the hand. They're the spark of God that is not seen anywhere, but really in the human mind, in the human spirit, to be able to perceive the beauty of life and the joy of love, right? That's the bird in the hand, to love yourself and your neighbor as yourself, knowing what property is and what your property is not. That's natural law. Knowing what morality is and what's morality. Morality is a method for evaluating the correctness of any interaction. That's all morality is. And nature is the bird in hand, but now processed food and Western medicine, all this new stuff, new technology, this is the two in the bush. This is trying to take a thing that's good and wanting to make it better when really it is not your place to be making that better, because those are just basic laws and principles. Speaking of laws and principles, natural law, that's another bird in the hand. It's a law that works. It was intended to work for us, for our upliftment. And now representative government and government regulations, things like that everybody's so in love with, making sure that there's enough for everybody and that everybody gets a fair share. This is the two birds in the bush. This is perfectionism, at least, it's the ideal of it is perfectionism, and those are the two. That is exactly what the saying warns against. And the point is, there's a big difference between innovation and gambling. And what we have is a world of gamblers. The world is run by philosophical gamblers who want to run from reality, and they are willing to bring their visions to fruition, even if it means destroying the world. They will see the world itself collapsing and take that risk because they don't value the world or their life as it is, but they want their fantasy, their vision to come true. And that's just like Soviet Russia, because communism is the ultimate example of a fantasy being forced on a nation of millions, leading to millions of deaths, and leading ultimately to a collapse of the entire system. And I'll let that be a foreshadowing to the rest of the episode, because it's going to be at the end. I'm going to come back to Soviet Russia and really this. But what actually happened? So 3 Pennsylvania state troopers and 7 other individuals spent hours inside a building in Amos Miller's Lancaster County farm while conducting a search on January 4th, 2024, eventually leaving with multiple coolers containing Miller's property. So they raided basically an organic farm, right? A search warrant was issued January 3rd, 2024. The probable cause was provided by the Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture, referencing incidents involving Miller's products dating back to 2016, with the latest including the claim that on December 19th, Morse was informed by the NY New York State Department of Health of a confirmed case of a foodborne pathogen. It's STEC, that's Shiga toxin producing E. coli. They found that in an underage individual who had allegedly consumed products from Miller's private buying club. It is also claimed that the cows at his farm were linked by DNA to be the cause, to be the cows that caused the illness itself. So this is what is claimed. And I don't think people talk about this, so I'll talk about this. I have to mention about DNA testing. This here is a story called Authentication of Forensic DNA Samples, conducted by the life science company Nucleix and published in the Journal of Forensic Science International. Quoting from that, the disturbing possibility that DNA evidence can be faked has been overlooked. It turns out that standard molecular biology techniques such as PCR, molecular cloning, and recently developed whole genome amplification enable anyone with basic equipment and know-how to produce practically unlimited amounts of in vitro DNA with any desired genetic profile. In other words, if you're a basic lab tech and you have a DNA sample, you could create a fake DNA sample. You could just effectively write the code and then you could leave it at a crime scene, presumably. This is what they're saying. Or you could just have it on hand and match it to the cows that they were testing. Very easily you have a DNA test faked that way. Back to the quote. Here we show that the current forensic procedure fails to distinguish between such samples of blood, saliva, and touch surfaces with artificial DNA and corresponding samples with in vivo natural DNA. So they're telling you that current forensic procedure will not even tell them apart, which means that DNA testing is essentially useless at this point. Now, can you determine if a DNA sample is actually real with tissue-specific methylation patterns and cell-specific mRNA expression? Yeah, you can. You could do that, but it's never done. It's never done as a procedure because everyone assumes that a DNA sample is legitimate. But as this episode develops, I will talk about the enormous powerful interest behind taking down such people as Amos Miller. And you'll see that really a DNA test, a fake DNA test, is the least they could do, because they really want a person like this shut down. So I want to talk about food safety and germs. You have to start there, right? Because that's the whole reason. That's the whole ostensible reason that they raided this farm. Raw food and especially raw milk are a huge debate. That's a hot debate in the United States. So on one side, the pro side of raw milk, you have the nutrients, the enzymes, the beneficial bacteria, you have improved taste, you have immune system effects, positive immune system effects, and also drinking raw milk being linked to both low asthma and no allergies. So that's one side. On the other side, you have contaminants and pathogens, especially germs. Really, that's the main idea for people who argue against raw milk, is that you can get sick from drinking it and you can get diseases. And that's essentially the two camps, right? Now, of course, the correct position to take in such a debate is the position that everyone has the freedom to make the choice to weigh the risks against the benefits for themselves. But I do want to make this point here that gets left out of the debate. Me, of course, I'm on the raw milk side, but I also have to say, yeah, raw milk can cause listeria and E. coli. Everything that isn't sterile can, right? Everything that is not sterile can cause disease. If it's alive, it can have certain bacteria, certain microorganisms that are not going to have a favorable effect if they get into your system, right? Now, raw by itself doesn't necessarily mean good. It, of course, doesn't mean bad. It doesn't necessarily mean good or bad just because it's raw. It just means living. And when something is living, that just means it can create change. And that's all it is. But the reason cow milk can even cause these illnesses is because it was not intended to nourish humans. It was not intended for human consumption. It was intended for a baby cow consumption. Now, yes, they have all the nutrients and can nourish you, but really they're for nourishing a cow, not a human. And the conditions they live in are conditions that are contrary to their nature, like being separated from their child, the mother cow being separated from a child, and then having another species drain their milk, like with machines, or just draining their milk that's intended for their baby. Those are conditions of slavery, and that's just the way it is. Even though I'm saying this from the side of raw milk, I'm defending raw milk, I'm defending Amos Miller here. I'm just saying this is how it is. And you see, this kind of milk making you sick, it never happens with breast milk. And that just tells you, if you're in accordance with nature, the way things were intended, you're not going to have these problems. Now, of course, you can pasteurize it, and even if you don't pasteurize it, that's fine. I'm not saying you can't drink it. I'm just saying, hey, you weigh the benefits against the risks. Now, onto the agenda. Why target milk? Like, why would somebody target milk? Why am I saying that they want to take down Amos Miller so much? And first of all, it's because milk, now I'm talking about pasteurized milk, it's the golden goose of the modern dominant mystical religion, which is Western medicine. Western medicine kind of owes its start to raw milk and pasteurizing it. Specifically Louis Pasteur and the germ theory, right? Louis Pasteur. I see the statistics everywhere of how many people used to get sick and die from all these raw milk pathogens as I was researching this. But I don't really see people pointing out that all of these cases, all of these instances of people dying, they're like a century old. They're over a century old. Meaning that these people that got these bacterial infections and died, they were living with worse nutrition, harsher conditions, and inferior hygiene. So it's not the raw milk itself that carries a risk. Anyway, it's the conditions and its contamination throughout the process, from preparation to storage to transportation. It's not that the milk is inherently toxic or anything like that, or has this bacteria. The bacteria gets there in the process. So it's about perfecting the process, yeah. And also, the strongest argument for raw milk and its safety is that when you get raw milk today, it's prepared and sold by somebody who understands the philosophy. See, they know you, the customer, and they're about organic living and health. And I mentioned pasteurization and germ theory. So let me put germ theory to bed once and for all. Do microorganisms make people sick? Yes. But that's not the end of the story. So when you talk about causes, there's more to talk about here. The first question with germs is, why do they make you sick? Like, why do they make people sick? And what is the purpose of these microbes? Because every living thing has a purpose within its ecosystem, within the universe in general. That's the first question. Like, why are they actually causing this? And the second question is, what caused those microorganisms to be there in the first place? And what I'm getting at is, think of it as if you're driving in a snowstorm and you're stopped at a red light, and then there's a car in front of you, there's a car behind you, and then another car doesn't stop in time. They slam on the brakes, the car keeps going, hits the car behind you, and then the car behind you hits you. In that scenario, who actually did the damage to your vehicle? Well, it would be the car behind you. You would have to, that's the actual collision that occurred, right? But when you ask who caused the accident, that's when you have to go to the original driver that didn't stop in time and is the one who caused a crash. This is the point with microorganisms, and why it's not that it's terrain or germ theory, right? Some germs, some living organisms do make people get sick. Like, this just happens like that, yeah. But the reason I don't subscribe to the germ theory is because I want to go back and ask, well, what created the condition, the terrain, for that to happen? See, it's actually not one or the other. This is a false dialectic, and this can be understood. In a domino effect scenario, you have to understand that there's a sequential chain, and then you have to go back to the first domino. That's what it's all about. Okay, and now in the 1850s, this is when this was happening, the germ theory. People like John Snow and Louis Pasteur, they began studying these microbes and microorganisms. And the reason they could do this is because in the 1800s, that was the century of the Industrial Revolution. Otherwise, they wouldn't have the time to do this. Running water, literacy, flushing toilets, electricity in the home, the combustion engine, all of these things, they come from the Industrial Revolution, the 1800s. It's such a dramatic shift that people, including me until recently, have not really taken into account how much changed because of that. Because of the dirty factories and sweatshops, as they're called. Because of that, this is the time period where we get all these things. Now, standard of living increasing means that intelligence and awareness of the population is increasing. And that is against the interests of any ruling class. It's against the interests of government, even on a simple, low level. Because if the people are smart, then the small-time politician even has to work harder. See, it forces them to be honest. Everyone in government has to work harder if you're smarter, because you'll call them out on their bullshit. And this is the case. I have these, there are all these graphs, about literacy and child mortality, overall, like percentage of people living in hunger, and it all just drops off in the 1800s, showing clearly what happened around this time. So the germ theory was pushed very hard at the end of the 1800s, precisely to take credit for the improved quality of life. Because it was clear that this is the direction that people were going. The people weren't going to be peasants and held down any longer. They were beginning to expand, to grow, and consciousness was progressing, and the ruling classes at the time knew this. So what they did was, in 1890 you have pasteurization, and around that time you have milk being regulated. And they made it so that it was government and sewage treatment plants and all of the government actions and regulations that would now take credit for the advances of civilization. And it worked. That worked. Just like that narrative worked about child vaccinations and child mortality. where you could look at these graphs. You can look at these graphs and see where the drop-off was happening, and that the significant drop-off happened right before child vaccination was introduced. And you actually even see a leveling off when it was introduced, suggesting that the child mortality went up. People see, the statistics are so obvious. It's very clear what actually happened, but everybody thinks that it was the vaccinations that really improved health, when that was not the case. And it just shows you that propaganda works, and this is why they're doing this. So next, I want to answer the question, why was he targeted by the government? Why was Amos Miller targeted by the government? Why am I making this whole big show about it? So here's an article last year in the Lancaster Patriot with Amos Miller. Miller said that with more and more consumers looking to buy directly from the farmers as food shortages became more regular, a new untapped market for producers is being created. He said people are looking to have connections to the people producing the food. They don't trust the large corporations, Miller said. It's not sustainable. For some reason, the government keeps endorsing the large corporations, and it can cause big trouble. As for his own court case, Miller said that if the USDA continues to enforce its regulations, like it has done recently, the food supply will continue to get worse. He also said he fears the government is willing to do anything to win the case. But the truth will rise to the top, Miller said. Time will tell in the end what's sustainable and what is not. I completely agree with him, by the way. And I just bring that article from a year ago to show you, at least you could hear from the man how he thinks, what he feels. And really, it's not even the raw milk itself that they have a problem with. It's his business model that they have a problem with. His business model is selling admission to the club like a membership, right? He's not actually selling you the milk, because to sell it across state lines would be illegal, and this whole thing with the regulations. All he's doing is selling admission, and you just have like a membership or a subscription fee, and then you privately interact with him, and then you get your products that way. They don't like that. They don't like the fact that he skillfully maneuvered around being regulated. Like an example is buffalo meat. He's selling water buffalo meat, which is considered an exotic animal. So then the USDA has no authorization to regulate that. This is one of the things he does, or did. And that business model, that's the innovation of the 21st century. That's the equivalent of running water and electricity in the 1800s. This is one of those things that can invert a human trend. This is how we progress, how we evolved. Invert a current trend and change a whole graph upside down. The business model that cuts out government interference, getting around the state, getting around that 40 or however % taxation. Think about how much that'll help people, how much more money they'll have, how much more time they'll have, how much more time they have to not chase money. See, this is the whole thing. It's not about getting all this money and amassing it and holding on to it. It's about having more energy, more capability, right? More ability to produce and share with the people who are valuable, right? The people who actually matter and who also advance humanity as a whole. See, this increases production by cutting out taxes, increases production by cutting out dumb and irrelevant regulations, and focusing its energy where it truly matters, on providing the best possible product. And also, it strengthens the bonds between seller and buyer, creating a true community. And these people at his farm, they don't think of him as just a salesman or the milkman. They're a community. And a community is the building block of a nation, a true nation. True communities and true nations. It is possible. This is how. See, Amos Miller is a trailblazer in this new model of commerce, which is doing business without selling the actual product, which is regulated by the state. Instead, he's selling a membership. And he really put himself out there. He took an enormous risk because he was a high profile, well known and controversial figure. He was always in these court battles and all this, so he was well known. It was predictable that he would be the first one to really get taken down. But since he is, we should be extra loud in defending this and talking about this story. I kind of did the same thing. I really rang the alarm when Vinny Eastwood when they were trying to put Vinny Eastwood in jail. I think this is that level of, hey, all hands on deck. We got to get this story out to people. And I'll talk more about food confiscation and explain why it's such a big deal at the end and where it's going. But the future of this kind of business model that he does is actually even more underground. I see it as actually different than even his model. I see it as the future being a gift economy. Right now, what I mean by that, you got a state like Wisconsin, but it produces 14% of the country's milk. 14% of the milk comes from Wisconsin. But in Wisconsin, because of the lobbying by these dairy industry, these dairy companies, selling raw milk is illegal. In almost all the other states, you could do it under restrictions, but illegal in Wisconsin. So in a state like Wisconsin, here's what the farmers should do. They should sell membership to workshops and classes on natural organic food. They should be teaching people about natural and organic food, and absolutely be doing this. This is important knowledge. And as a part of that, when they do, they should be given the option to donate, to make donations to the instructor, to the farmer. And when they do donate, then the farmer or instructor can give them the milk, right? Can give them the raw milk, but not sell it. See, no product is ever purchased that way. Therefore, there's nothing to regulate, and therefore there's nothing for the damn bureaucrats and tax collectors to take from the farmers, the damn vultures that they are. And there's no demanding a tribute that they never earn. That's the future. And Amos Miller and people like him, they show here how things actually get done to make the world a better place. How things actually get done is not petitioning the government. It's not protesting to get them to allow interstate sales of raw milk. It's not campaigning to remove the regulations. But the way to get change done in the world is to just do business freely without them. Do business without them, because the truth is, they can't stop us. They can't stop us. If you got two smart people dealing with each other who are careful, they cannot stop us. They cannot stop what we sell to each other, what we share to each other. They cannot stop who you marry or have a relationship with. They cannot stop this. They can't. They're not able to. And this is the simple solution. And when people refuse to play along and just produce, just do what you do, and trade among one another, then the government will not be able to stop it. They will try to, and after they are forced to act like the predatory crooks that they are, they will fall. They're going to fail once we force them to show their true colors. This is crucially important. That's why it's crucially important what Amos Miller does. He might be going away, he might be going bankrupt, who knows? The fact is he did the right thing, and he's a trailblazer now. Now, he paved the way. Like, he's the one who has to take the hit. Now the people who come after him and start a whole movement, now we can get more change done with lesser individual risks. This is how things are done. So we need to follow this and really get this gift economy farmer idea out there. I wouldn't exactly put it as a YouTube title, because we have to be careful, of course. We have to maintain some secrecy, right? I mean, we are talking about dealing with a tyrannical government, right? So we have to stay fluid and flexible with that. But inflexible and very rigid in our principles. See, the way to do this, the way to fix all this, the whole world, is non-participation in the programs of the state. One of the main ones being economic and regulatory. And this is the solution in all aspects, even a political and military way. Just non-participation with the state, and we'll win. If we just don't participate, we'll win. And for that, my salute to Amos Miller. I'm fully in support of him. Now, I'll read now from some other stories to show what's actually being done to the farmers, the producers of the food, and the people who actually feed us. Because look, I'm a vegan, right? If cows or chickens are gone tomorrow, it doesn't affect me at all. But the reality is, if those farmers are gone overnight, you get starvation and acceptance of hardcore slavery pretty fast. And those are just the facts. Now, this other story is from a 2013 Washington Times article named "Oppressing the Farmers: New Regulations Force Growers Out of Markets." Every time Congress takes up a farm bill, as the House did Thursday, the politicians tell us that it's all about saving the family farm. Government must step in, they say, with enormous subsidies, new regulations, and unsought guidance from the city slickers, or the little guys will be swallowed by the cold and heartless agribusiness. Decades of heavy-handed government regulation is having just the opposite effect. Don Bessemer, the 70-year-old operator of the only working farm in the neighborhood of Akron, Ohio, has stopped raising lettuce, peppers, squash, and corn. His popular farm stand is closed, and with it jobs for 30 people. Mr. Bessemer's produce has vanished from the area's Acme supermarkets, and he will harvest only soybeans now. The blame for all this falls squarely on the 2011 Food Safety Modernization Act, which requires farmers such as Mr. Bessemer to track their produce from seed to store if the vegetables are usually served raw. In the wisdom of the bureaucrats, sweet corn, usually boiled or roasted, is exempt, but lettuce and peppers are not. Of course, this is nothing logical. This is just targeting raw food. They're saying cooked is fine because what does cooking do? It kills the microorganisms, so therefore it's sterile, therefore they say it's safe. But really they're targeting raw food because raw food is what is actually nutritious and conducive to health. Pretty simple here. I can fight the bugs, Mr. Bessemer told the Akron Beacon Journal. I can fight the lack of rain, but when the guy comes with a clipboard, what are you going to do? He estimates the new regulations will cost $100,000 for initial compliance and another $30,000 annually. He's never been accused of sending unsafe food to market. That was Article 2. Article 3, we got a Time magazine article entitled "American Farms Are in Crisis, Here's Why." And this is an article about the Reekman family, who's owned a farm in Wisconsin for nearly 200 years. They're $300,000 in debt. From the article, the nation lost more than 100,000 farms between 2011 and 2018, 12,000 of those between 2017 and 2018 alone. Farm debt at $416 billion is at an all-time high. More than half of all farmers have lost money every year since 2013, and farm loan delinquencies are rising. Suicides in farm communities are happening with alarming frequency. Farmers aren't the only workers in the American economy being displaced by technology, but when they lose their jobs, they are also ejected from their homes and the land that's been in their family for generations. It hits you so hard when you feel like you're the one who is losing the legacy that your great-grandparents started, said Randy Raker, a Wisconsin dairy farmer who has struggled with depression and whose neighbor, Leon Statz, committed suicide last year after financial struggles forced him to sell his 50 dairy cows. Raker estimates he is losing $30,000 a month. Even large companies are facing unprecedented challenges. Dean Foods, a global dairy producer that buys milk from thousands of small farmers, filed for bankruptcy Tuesday, November 12th, and is seeking a sale, a move that could further hamper farmers looking for prices to sell their milk. So now I want to move out from the farmers and talk about Dean Foods and I'm going to talk about the dairy industry as a whole for people to really understand what's going on. So what's Dean Foods? Dean Foods, the original Dean Foods building, is actually 5 minutes from my house. And I never even knew it, but it's just down the street over there. It's 5 minutes from my house, Dean Foods. It was founded by Samuel E. Dean Sr., a milk processing facility in Franklin Park, Illinois, in 1925. And after purchasing other Illinois dairy plants, Dean developed the enterprise from a small regional dairy into a diversified food company. For background about Dean Foods, here's a 1986 article from the New York Times, back in the days where maybe the New York Times was a bit more reputable, entitled "A Dairy Soars by Adhering to Basics," February 15th, 1986. Quote, "While most food companies are shifting as fast as they can away from commodities and toward highly profitable packaged foods, the Dean Foods Company has stayed put, sticking largely to that most basic of commodities, milk. The strategy has paid off handsomely. It has become the leading dairy not only in Chicago, but also in other major markets around the United States, supplying milk sold under private labels at such grocery chains as Super Value, Jewel, and Kroger. It is also a major supplier of ice cream sold through the about 425 Baskin-Robbins outlets. And though not a household name, Dean Foods has become one of the most profitable companies in the food industry." It just came to my mind that this is another example of the bird in the hand as opposed to the two in the bush. He stayed put to milk. There's a guy who was interested in milk. He made a milk company and he stayed put with milk. He didn't go on to the new fads or trends or try to change who he is. He stuck to principles. And Dean, based in Franklin Park, Illinois, a Chicago suburb, has increased its profits 14 years in a row, and sales have grown about 15% annually during that period. Remember, this is in 1986. Its return on equity is 23.6%, according to analysts, putting it not far behind the food industry's perennial leader, the Kellogg Company. Dean knows that the key to success in the commodity business, particularly the dairy industry, which has been plagued by overcapacity and relatively flat consumption, is to hold down costs. A straightforward, no-nonsense company. It used to be the straightforward, no-nonsense company, and then in 2001 you get the beginning of the end. In December 2001, the legacy brand of Dean Foods was acquired by the Dallas-based Suiza Foods Corporation, who later adopted the Dean Foods name, and as a part of the merger, 11 plants were divested under the name National Dairy to a group led by Dairy Farmers of America. Keep Dairy Farmers of America in mind because I'm going to talk about them. This all makes sense at the end. Now, Suiza Foods was the beginning of the end. And this is quoting from a website called fundinguniverse.com. This is their history of Suiza Foods. Suiza Foods had its start in 1988 when an investment firm, Kaminsky Engels Capital Corporation, formed by Greg Engels and Robert Kaminsky, purchased the Ready Ice packaged ice business from the Southland Corporation, who's the owner of 7-Eleven. They purchased it for $26 million. My point here is it started from an investment firm, which is much different than an entrepreneur. See, in principle, it's just way different than an entrepreneur. It's different than a self-made guy. These are money guys. And I'll explain why that's significant. Suiza Foods Corporation has seemingly come out of nowhere to become one of the leading fresh milk and dairy food companies in the United States. The trade magazine Dairy Foods ranked Suiza as the number 4 dairy company as of year-end 1997, behind Kraft Foods, Land O'Lakes, and Dean Foods, moving up from the number 19 position in only 1 year, 19 to 4 in 1 year. The company's spectacular growth from $341 million in 1993 to a forecasted $3.4 billion in 1998 has been fueled by an aggressive program of acquisition, through which it is serving, along with Dean Foods, as a major consolidator of the dairy industry. Just since its public offering in April 1996, Suiza Foods has completed more than 40 acquisitions. Real quick, I'll cut in to say the big deal here is this isn't your organic company taking over its competitors. This is how it works to take out people like Samuel E. Dean and taking out people like Amos Miller. It's these mega purchases by money from investment firms, which means what? Money from the stock market really out of nowhere. They're not producers. They're producers of money. They're creators of paper currency, and then they buy, and then they manipulate the whole industry to fit their agenda. Yeah. Now, the U.S. dairy industry of the 1990s was highly fragmented when they started, with numerous family-owned corporations that were ideal acquisitions candidates. And Engel's formula for growth was evident right from his first foray into dairy, and actually was earlier applied to ice packaging, where he came from. His plan was to purchase the leading dairy in a region, and then fill it in with additional acquisitions in that region. He would buy around them. And then he would cut operations. By consolidating operations, closing plants, and cutting jobs, the first dairy acquired, the main purchase, would gain market share, increase its efficiency, and become more profitable. So he would cut out their production, right? And because you have more in the whole market, see, this is market manipulation. They're making more money that way. But long term, they're actually destroying themselves and the industry. And this is how the ruling class has taken back the freedom generated during the Industrial Revolution. See, you start out with an industry where virtually anybody who has drive and has ability can come in, can create wealth, and can advance innovation. And then these bankers and investors, they buy them out. They buy them out after government policy has slowly made it, downright impossible to continue business. And then these people who buy the company, they know nothing about the business. They only know about contracts and shaking hands and connections and insider trading. They buy the company, and then they run it into the ground and essentially loot the company, and then give the resources to their friends, their connections, and the people that they're loyal to or owe a favor to. This is the game. And this is how government gets a central monopoly corporation without actually having to do it. See, this is how they fool a post-industrial revolution population. They can't just do it because the people are too smart for that. They have to do this roundabout trickery where nobody really knows. I bet the people at Dean Foods didn't even know what was going on. Because if you don't understand the mentality, you're not going to see something like this. They did it through the illusion of parity. See, instead of a single company, you have these endless, unspecified collectives and partnerships in all of these companies. But all of their structures ensure it's the same kind of structure, so it ensures that they act exactly the same as a government socialized single company would act. With the exception here being that a cooperation or a collective like this, the new kind, can function and produce, unlike when governments socialize or nationalize an industry or a company. It always crashes when they do that. But when they do these partnerships, they can actually function for a little bit, because you still have people who think they're free, working on something that they're good at, right? About Dean Foods, here's a 2013 Reuters article that's 12 years after the acquisition by Suiza Foods. Dean Foods to close milk factories as earnings sour. Top U.S. company, Dean Foods Company, said it would close up to 15% of its factories in the face of increasing competition and falling volumes, as it reported a quarterly loss and warned of more tough times ahead. The company said that it plans to close 8 to 12 of its factories by the middle of next year to cut costs as milk volumes fall. We have accelerated the severance, including our plans to close 10 to 15% of our plants. We expect these efforts to offset the volume deleverage, Chief Executive Greg Tanner said in a conference call with the analysts. Dean Foods is the largest processor and distributor of milk in the country. It says it is about 5 times the size of its next largest competitor. Now, how is this possible? How is it possible that the largest processor falls like this without a competitor taking its place, like a loud succession? How does that happen? It's because it's an intentional collapse from within. This is the whole point. And in November 2019, a few years later, Dean Foods files for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. And that's the end of Dean Foods. Now, when that happens, what happens next? I'll tell you. This is from a Time magazine article, and this one from January of 2020, a few months after. It's called "Milk Has Long Been a Staple of American Life, but now the dairy industry is in trouble." For much of the 20th century, milk was a simple part of daily life in the U.S. As farmers raised cows, milkmen delivered bottles, and children chugged it at school. But those days are fading, a fact accentuated by the announcement on January 5th by Borden Dairy that it is filing for bankruptcy protection. Borden, which said it was impacted by market challenges facing the dairy industry, follows Dean Foods, America's largest milk producer, which filed for bankruptcy protection in November. The downturn has been tough on dairy processors like Borden and Dean, which buy fresh milk from farms and use techniques like pasteurization to create a consumer-safe beverage with a longer shelf life. For the past 5 years, thanks to technology that increased milk production, fresh milk prices were relatively low, which meant processors could break even despite shifting demand. But prices began ticking up again last year, squeezing the processors' already tight margins. Milk processors are also facing competition from big retailers, which have set up their own processing plants. And in 2018, Walmart opened a milk processing plant in Indiana to serve hundreds of stores in the Midwest, taking away approximately 95 million gallons of milk processing business from Dairy Foods. On the other end of the supply chain, dairy farms are facing trouble of their own. The low prices that were a boon to processors left small farmers struggling across the country. The number of Chapter 12 farm bankruptcies in 2019 was up 24% from the previous year. "We're trying our darnest to hang on," said Mary Riekman, a dairy farmer in Wisconsin, whose family has turned to GoFundMe to keep their century-old farm running. Now that's Mary Riekman, from the Riekman family from Article 3. That's a small world, huh? It's pretty amazing, and it certainly was amazing when I researched this whole dairy industry, how much overlap there is between, I guess, farmers, but really executives of companies. I'll get there soon enough. Now, Borden, which was founded in 1857, around the Industrial Revolution, of course, has 3,300 employees and 13 plants across the South and Midwest. The company says it plans to continue to operate as it restructures under court supervision. But if that plan fails, it wouldn't be the first dairy processor to cease operations. There were 605 fluid milk plants in America in 1990, and by 2018 there were only 459. Now, after Dean Foods goes out of business, who got all their infrastructure? Who got all their product? Who got their technology? And who got their equipment? And this is your answer. The cooperative Dairy Farms of America was specifically named as a potential buyer. In 2020, all of Dean's assets were acquired by several companies. The largest share of assets was purchased by Dairy Farmers of America for $425 million. Remember, Dairy Farmers of America is who originally got the 11 plants at the time of that Suiza merger in 2009. They keep coming up. And in fact, if you look at the 2019 list of the largest dairy producers in the world, number 6 in the world, biggest in the US, is Dairy Farmers of America. Of course, they became that after, this is before Dean Foods actually went out of business. This is while they were still running. But see, they already have purchased some of their plants before, and of course they were growing, and they're number 6 in the world. Number 11 in the world was Dean Foods, when after it was overtaken by Dairy Farmers of America. And then 14 you got Kraft Heinz, and 19 you got Schreiber Foods. Those are American companies. They're giants of the dairy industry. But keep in the back of your mind Dairy Farmers of America, and you can actually even tell by how they sound. Dean Foods is a guy. His last name was Dean. He named his company Dean Foods. He was a principled, no-nonsense guy. This, you have Dairy Farmers of America. Who are they? Nobody knows. They're just the Dairy Farmers of America. These are the collectives I'm talking about. This is like when communist dictatorships are called people's states. The people's state, the Soviet Union, everything's, unionized. Dairy Farmers of America. And let's talk about Dairy Farmers of America. See, Dairy Farmers of America is a national milk marketing cooperative in the United States. The DFA markets members' raw milk and sells milk and derivative products. And it was formed in 1998 through the merger of 4 dairy companies. So, I did a deep dive, kind of did some digging. I like to do this when I come across a company that I know nothing about. So, let's start with the head. You got the president and CEO, Dennis Rodenbaugh. He is on the executive board of directors for the National Milk Producers Federation, the NMPF. The NMPF was organized in 1916 in Chicago, Illinois, of course, to provide a forum for dairy producers and the cooperatives they own to participate in public policy discussions. NMPF advocates policies to Congress, U.S. and foreign government agencies, industry organizations, the news media, and the public. Like, do you get what I just read? They basically tell government and the people, they're organized to basically bring forth their information. What they are is a pressure group. They're a propaganda company for the cooperatives, right? Which is these collectives for places like the Dairy Farmers of America, whoever they are, whoever they're supported by. But these are the people who have the pull to influence Congress, to influence other government agencies, right? I always talk about global government. People think it's such an abstract thing. They tell you that they advocate policies to foreign government agencies and to the news media. We tell people, hey, the mainstream media is controlled, and they tell us we're crazy for believing it. Meanwhile, this is on one of the biggest dairy companies in the world. It's on their website. Their CEO is not hiding that he does this. It's on his resume that he does this. This is how they do. This is how they work. They have a set of topics of interests. Now I'm talking about NMPF now, the National Milk Producers Federation. On their website, they have like a set of topics of interests, and then of all those topics, key issues, they have a position and they explain the position on the website. And the first one I clicked on is the Federal Milk Marketing Order. I just wanted to find out, hey, what's the Federal Milk Marketing Order? So here it is. Unfavorable economic conditions, chaotic fluid milk pricing, and dealers who squeezed farmers on prices in the early 20th century left farmers with low prices and disorderly markets. To return market power to producers, the federal government established the Federal Milk Marketing Order. According to them, this is why it happened. That was introduced in the 1930s. Of course, they blamed capitalism. They said it was the industrialists that did this. And the way they present it is that they did this to help the farmers. They say producers, to return market power to producers. They say that like they mean farmers. What they mean is these big companies who are trying to squeeze the whole market, right? So these marketing orders, they establish provisions under which the dairy processors buy fresh milk from the dairy farmers who supply a marketing area. maintaining stable and marketing relationships for all handlers and producers, and organizing the complex process of marketing fresh milk. The USDA oversees the Federal Milk Marketing Program, or Marketing Orders Program, which includes 11 milk marketing orders and applies to about 75% of total U.S. milk productions. Federal orders establish minimum prices paid to farmers, ensure payments to farmers are accurate and timely, and provide market information. I mean, it's tough reading all this. My head hurts just from reading all this, corporate government talk. I really feel like I should take a break, but there's no time. But basically, the last sentence there is the significant one. They establish minimum prices. That's the big deal. These milk marketing orders, they establish minimum prices. This is the big deal. Now, the National Milk Producers Federation supports the federal legislation that authorizes the milk marketing order system. So on their website, they say, hey, okay, this is what the milk marketing orders are. We support this. They support the legislation that authorizes it, as well as improvements that increase clarity and producer understanding of milk pricing, and ensure an orderly market and fair prices for dairy farmers. But by the way, as I'm reading this stuff, I hope you're catching on the jargon and the really bullshit language, like fair prices. Anytime somebody says fair prices, they're giving you bullshit communist rhetoric. Ensure an orderly market means we control your transactions. I hope, I'm not translating these words in real time, but this is how you should see them. The NMPF also supports the ability of cooperatives to vote as a block on federal milk marketing order issues, supporting the goal of daily cooperatives to effectively market milk for the highest possible financial return to its farmer owners. Now, of course, I support the capitalists, so am I going to be mad that the milk companies want to make the maximum profit? No, I absolutely hold nothing against them, no matter who they are. But when you're influencing politicians and influencing the media and trying to spread your propaganda, and you're actually supporting these federal orders that are going to establish minimum prices, that's when I have a problem. And we got to talk about those minimum prices, what are called price floors, because it's absolutely crucial to all this. This is a picture from the chapter 4. This is in chapter 4 of the University of Minnesota textbook, Principles of Economics. And you have your graph here where it basically shows you supply and demand, and then there's an equilibrium price, and the equilibrium is where all transactions are going to hover around. That's the actual price. And what price floors do is they upset that balance, and they actually create a surplus. Price minimums, they're going to give the farmers this amount of money for selling their milk, right? That's what I mean by price minimums. Now, again, on first glance, that's good because you get the money even if the equilibrium price would be lower. But it's actually, it doesn't help in the long run, and it actually destroys the consumers as well as the farmers in the long run. First of all, because it creates a surplus by nature. Now, this is a fundamental regression because you're not supposed to be creating a surplus. You're not supposed to create something that you can't sell. The way economics works, in the sense that it advances the standard of life, is that as it holds to the equilibrium, as technology advances and prices are always going towards reduction, and then innovation has to increase to maintain the equilibrium. That equilibrium of supply and demand is what actually advances our standard of life and our quality of life. Okay? But it comes down to fewer people sell their product, fewer people get food. Everybody loses. Except the government, who now has a surplus. Okay? I'll read a bit from this textbook. Farm legislation passed during the Great Depression. It has been modified many times, but the federal government has continued its direct involvement in agricultural markets. This has meant a variety of government programs that guarantee a minimum price for some types of agricultural products. These programs have been accompanied by government purchases of any surplus, by requirements to restrict acreage in order to limit those surpluses, by crop or production restrictions, and the like. So that's what comes. See, those price minimums, they don't just give them away without something in return. They want you to restrict your acreage. What's the point of restricting your acreage? They're going to say it's to reduce the surplus, but they're really just taking your land in an arbitrary way, just telling you that you could have this amount of land, or they're going to restrict how much you can actually produce. Hey, this is socialism. This is your command economy. This is before 1973 in America. And until 1973, the government would buy the surplus from the farmers. They'd actually buy what they don't sell, right? That's in exchange for the concessions they make. The government can store the surpluses or find special use for them. For example, surpluses generated in the United States have been shipped to developing countries as grants and aid or distributed to local school lunch programs. As a variation on this program, the government can require farmers who want to participate in the price support program to reduce acreage in order to limit the size of the surpluses. I just talked about this. Cutting production, exporting the food, exporting it to other countries. This is in the long term killing a nation. This kills a nation. And this is the plan. I'll explain that this is the agenda. After 1973, the government stopped buying the surpluses, with some exceptions, and simply guaranteed farmers a target price. If the average market price for a crop fell below the crop's target price, then the government paid the difference. As opposed to buying the surplus, they'll just give them the money. But of course, for farmers to receive these payments, they had to agree to remove acres from production and to comply with certain conservation provisions. Yeah? These restrictions sought to reduce the size of the surplus generated by the target price, which acted as a kind of price floor. This is exactly what I'm talking about. Why do they want them to reduce their damn production so bad? Because they're trying to destroy the capability to produce of these people. They want them gone. They want to eliminate them. This is the slow creeping socialism that we're seeing. That's, post-Soviet. Now, what are the effects of such farm support programs? The intention is to boost and stabilize farm incomes, but with price floors, consumers pay more for food than they would otherwise, and governments spend heavily to finance the programs. With the target price approach, consumers pay less, but government financing of the program continues because they have to pay the farmers. In other words, the new approach that they're using now, where they just pay the farmers, they match the price. The new approach makes farmers more dependent on government because they're getting direct payments from them. And that puts more distance between them and the people they're feeding. Because now, if you were to see, if they stop giving them those, if they stop matching that price and paying them, and you saw that real price of that food, those apples or carrots at the grocery store, you would get angry, right? You would be outraged at the farmer, when really you should be outraged at the government interference. And also, this keeps price low, at least the perception of the price, so that the people don't get upset. And then they keep paying the taxes, and then they keep voting for politicians. And that's what our friend Dennis is involved in. That's their CEO. He also sits on the board of directors for the Global Dairy Platform. If you go to the Global Dairy Platform, the first thing you're going to see is daily net zero. Of course, environmentalism, net zero, which is never going to happen unless it does happen and we basically stop existing as a species. Global Dairy Platform's membership of dairy companies, associations, scientific bodies, and other partners collaborate pre-competitively to lead and build evidence on dairy's role in the diet and show the sector's commitment to responsible food production. So what they just told you, that it's a mix of all the top executives on the top global dairy producers that are supposed to be competitors. All of that list that's out there, the top 20. It's a mix of those executives with scientists and with public relations guys to present their advertising to people and then call it science and say that's scientific proof of how nutritious dairy is. And that bullshit science is mainly on the shoulders of Dr. Mitch Cantor. The main scientist at Global Dairy Platform, Mitch Cantor, PhD, serves as the Chief Science Officer for Food Minds, a division of Pedia. Mitch has been in the food industry for more than 25 years, serving in health and nutrition director-level roles for various multinational companies, Quaker Oats, Gatorade, General Mills, Cargill, and agricultural organizations, American Egg Board. He holds MS and PhD degrees from the Ohio State University, and he served as the NIH postdoctoral research fellow at Washington University School of Medicine in St. Louis. Quite the resume, and what it tells me is that he's your classic sellout. He's your classic puppet on a string, a scientist who's a mouthpiece of the parasites of the dairy industry. That's Mitch Cantor, and I haven't met him in person, but I'd bet quite a bit on that that's exactly who he is. Look who he's been involved in. All the top corporations, government, and he's been in the industry 25 years, and he specializes in what? He's a scientist. So now if a new breakout study came and it turns out it's not healthy at all, he would just present that, right? Being a top executive at one of these companies. He's not a top executive, but he has been, right? So no connections there, no kickbacks, no jobs for his children, nothing like that, right? He is just a pure scientist and not mentally an executive of one of these companies. That's my point. For more than a decade, the Global Dairy Platform has led the daily sector's collaborative efforts to encourage the appropriate intake of nutrient-rich dairy foods and demonstrate the sector's role in sustainable agriculture. Of course, so basically, like I said, it's a propaganda arm, right? They say, together we aim to demonstrate dairy's contribution to global food systems, lead healthy diets, and sustainable livelihoods. And this is who Dennis is a part of. That's their CEO. And you can do this kind of a research yourself. You could look at the staff list of all these companies. And I would say don't worry about the CEO or the top line, because most often they're just puppets. Most often the top line is puppets. If you want to find out what a company is about or people in that company, you got to look for words like strategy or policy or signs. Because it's about ideas. You want to get the guys who are in charge of ideas. And along those lines, here's another DFOA executive. Remember, this is all Dairy Farmers of America. This sounds like we're talking about farmers that are just selling their milk altogether like a big happy family. This is your Chief Scientific and Regulatory Officer, Rob Byrne. As Chief Scientific and Regulatory Officer, Rob provides leadership and regulatory oversight across the cooperative, working closely with our commercial businesses and areas to support continuous improvement in food safety and quality. Prior to joining DFA, he served in leadership roles in the area of food safety, quality assurance, regulatory, and science for the National Milk Producers Federation, mentioned before, the International Dairy Foods Association, which I'll mention right after this, and most recently with Schreiber Foods, that giant, fourth place on the list of biggest American dairy companies. Most recently there as Vice President of Industry and Regulatory Affairs. Rob is active in the industry, serving as chair of IDFA's Standards and Labeling Committee and as a member on its Food Safety, International Trade and International Standards Task Force committees, and the Innovation Center for the U.S. Dairies Food and Safety Operating Committee. There's more. He is also a member of the American Daily Science Association, Institute of Food Technologists, and International Association for Food Protection. This is how it goes. See, and I told you, I looked for this guy because I looked for signs, and I'm like, aha, this is the guy. And lo and behold, sure enough, you see that he's been everywhere, from the scientific side to the executive side to in government, in policy, labeling, and this is how it goes in this dairy industry. This is an example of the new age socialism, new age communism being so far advanced in an industry. You've got guys like this who are connected to everything. This is your one big happy family. And again, they mentioned the International Dairy Foods Association. It was in Dennis's resume as well. And same thing, the International Dairy Foods Association, IDFA. Let's explore. I did the same thing. So I saw Senior Vice President of Legislative Affairs and Economic Policy. Click right on that. J. David Carlin. Now let's see. There's no way this guy who's like works for this company had something to do with government or something to do with other stuff like that, or no way, right? J. David Carlin leads the association's legislative, political, and economic policy activities. He was a partner with the law firm of Akin Gump Strauss Hauer and Feld LLP until joining IDFA, and has extensive experience in food and agriculture policy. Carlin has represented numerous food and agriculture companies, cooperatives, and trade associations before the House and Senate Agricultural Committees and at the U.S. Department of Agriculture. After graduating from Harvard Law School, Carlin joined Akin Gump in 1988. In 1995, President Bill Clinton appointed him to serve as the Assistant Secretary for Congressional Relations under Agriculture Secretary, Dan Glickman at USDA. As the head of the Office of Congressional and Intergovernmental Relations, Carlin served as primary USDA liaison with Congress and the White House Office of Legislative Affairs. He returned to Akin Gump in 1998 to focus on his practice on public law and policy matters. And the cherry on top is that Akin Gump, his law, who he was a lawyer for, that's your second largest lobbying firm in America. And that's actually what legislative affair means. It's a euphemism for lobbying. So he's a lobbyist. So the way lobbying works in these companies, they can't just pay the politicians directly. They have to either do it under the table through like suggestive, sneaky ways like they do it in movies, or they hire a lawyer, and then the lawyer in a professional capacity actually does what you can't do, which is pay the executives, or present information to them and basically spin them a story that will make them pass the law that you want. So he's a lobbyist, and he was of course in government positions. So, of course, no conflict of interest there, right? This is not anything crooked. Of course it is, and you can go on and on and on and find all these people and click on their picture, read their bio, go to the websites of these companies, and you will see how all this works. I'm not a genius to be doing this stuff. I just know the things to look for, and I just spent almost an hour and a half telling you the things to look for. And my head definitely hurts from that, and I'm happy to be through with that. Now we're getting to what I wanted to talk about. Your history, the confiscation of food. They went into Amos Miller's farm, They took his fridges. They took the food from his house and confiscated it because they said that it was dangerous. Now, confiscation of food on farms, where does it come from? When I talk about history, please keep in mind it's not because I like history. I don't like studying history. Keep in mind this is what will happen. If you don't do anything, it will happen here in America or Canada or Poland. It will happen, and people make the mistake. They look at the Soviets or the Nazis or Mao or Pol Pot and they say, yeah, they recognize that what they were the leaders. They were psychopath leaders of, and they were just murderous psychopaths. They recognize it, yeah. But when they talk about our government, they say, yeah, our government is corrupt. They might say, yeah, our government is messed up, or they might say they're dumb. But they're not murderous psychopaths. They wouldn't do what they did in Russia or China or North Korea. And I am here to tell you once again that they absolutely are. These people in the government here are murderous psychopaths. Maybe not the top row, maybe not the puppets. These people, that's who they are. And to touch people's food, this is what set me off. To touch somebody's food, to tell them what they can and cannot eat, to take food from a family's household, from an innocent person, like they're not doing anything. It's not a gun you're taking. You're taking food from somebody's house. I see that as perverse and as hideous of an act as rape and pedophilia. It's really that high for me. Because it's such stripping of dignity. It's a fundamental violation of everything good in the world. Everything, your basic sustenance to eat. You know, you can never be put in a worse position than being starving, because it's your most base need. Right? It's your base need. You just need basic fuel to keep your body going. And by taking that away, it's a satanic inversion of nature. It's taking the life force, literally their life force that they take energy from, their main source of energy, taking the life force of an innocent being away and reducing them to being subhuman. That's what they're doing. So, you know, you can't overreact to something like that. It's time to react to something like that, for real. And I do like that people have made noise about this story. People, I love to add my voice to the chorus of that, because this did rub people the wrong way. See, we know what's going on when this is happening to farmers and people making organic food, and they're getting their shit confiscated like this is something legitimate. But the people spraying the food and putting fluoride in the water, no, they're not doing nothing. See, I can't put the tap on without having something that Hitler put in the concentration camps. I can't turn the tap on and drink this, right? You can't. If a child is thirsty, you have to tell them to stay away from the sink that is provided there as a source of water. And I have to reverse osmosis filter my water just not to be poisoned? What kind of a fucking world is this? We have been overly soft and benevolent to people like this. But the history of food confiscation. It was called the Podrazverska, which is Russian, of course, so it's probably not the right name. Now that's grain confiscation in World War I Russia and later in Communist Russia. And that, of course, led to the Holodomor. The Holodomor was a famine in Soviet Ukraine in 1932 and 1933 specifically, and that resulted in the death of around 3 to 5 million people. 3 to 5 million people died of starvation in Ukraine, which was under control of the Soviets. That's Holocaust numbers. We all hear about the Holocaust. This is 3 to 5 million people that died. Direct result of government actions of this grain confiscation. Now this happened under Joseph Stalin. It was the Russian Soviet Union, and what it started out as, it was essentially Stalin's war on the kulaks. The kulaks were basically like the middle class at the time. They were the landowners. They were the landowners. Look, this is before, you know, it was urbanized to a degree, but it's largely, villages, farms, towns, and there all the work is on the land, farming, right? So the people who own the land, they hire all the people. They basically are the staple, the fixture of the town. And of course, Joseph Stalin and Soviet, the communists, they were all against that, because they were these are the people making the money, they're the ones mistreating the workers, and we got to take all of their property, and then supposedly they would share it equally. And of course, this is just they just take it, right? They just take it, and they just parasitically, cannibalistically consume the entire nation, is what they did. Now, what makes you a kulak, what makes you this person that basically you were left to, you were killed for this, and then everybody else was left to starve, is if you had more than 8 acres of land. If you had 8 acres of land, you were marked for death. That's 6 football fields. And here's how it starts. In May 1929, the Sovnarkom issued a decree which formalized the notion of the kulak household, according to which any of the following criteria defined a person as a kulak. So this marked you for death. Use of hired labor. If you hiring somebody, if you're an employer, dead. Ownership of a mill, a creamery, other processing equipment, or a complex machine with a motor. Complex machine with a motor. Anything that has an engine. That marks you for death. Also, systematic renting out of agricultural equipment or facilities. If you have a plow, this could be anything. If you have any kind of equipment and you rent it out because you did well for yourself and you had 2, that marks you for death. And fourth, involvement in trade, money lending, commercial brokerage, or other sources of non-labor income. In other words, if you're not a slave, if you don't make all of your money from slavery, you're marked for death. And literally marked for death. The liquidation of kulaks as a class was announced by Stalin on December 27th, 1929. Listen, this is not wartime. It's not wartime. The world knew this was going on and stood by. They liquidated them as a class. Liquidation means to kill them, right, to exterminate them. On January 30th, 1930, on measures for the elimination of kulak households in District of Comprehensive Civilization. That's quite the name for a document. Here are the measures they basically decreed. 1, there's those to be executed for treason or imprisoned as decided by the local secret political police. They would straight up execute them. Then those exiled for treason to Siberia or the north after determined to be traitors. My great grandfather was sent to Siberia. He was one of those people exiled to Siberia, and basically you're marked for death over there, except you just do more hard labor until you die. This is like you get sent there, you're working all day in these conditions, like your legs are rotting. This is basically what it is. To be sent to Siberia. It's not just a POV camp. You're sent there to do hard labor until you die. My own family, right? And then the third group, those considered traitors or were guilty of terrorism, were to be evicted from their houses and used in labor colonies within their own districts. So that's a special treatment. I guess you become a slave in your own district. Not quite Siberia. Now, from 18th of November 1932, peasants from Ukraine were required to return extra grain they had previously earned for meeting their targets. State police and party brigades were sent into these regions to root out any food they can find. And when I see Amos Miller and I see the whole confiscation, this is the image I'm getting in my head. The government is sending people to somebody's house to take food away there. See, they're dealing with food. It starts out with being for the sake of public health. Well, the fact that it was these cows that supposedly caused someone to get E. coli, that may sound reasonable to you, but that's just the modern day justification. It's the same thing as Stalin saying that these people who own this land are destabilizing the economy and exploiting the workers. It's really the same thing. The fact is, they're coming to people's houses that didn't do anything, and they're taking their food away from them. 8 days before that, 2 days after those peasants were required to return the grain, a law was passed forcing peasants who could not meet their grain quotas to surrender any livestock they had. So they give you a grain quota. They give all these workers like the extra grain, a certain amount of grain, to give that away. Now, if you were not able to do it because there wasn't enough, you have to give your animals away, which is, again, your food. 8 days later, collective farms that failed to meet their quotas were placed on blacklists, in which they were forced to surrender 15 times their quota. Now, if that doesn't make sense to you, welcome to communism. This is how it goes. These farms were picked apart for any possible food by party activists. Yeah. Blacklisted communes had no right to trade or receive deliveries of any kind and became death zones. Yes, well said. In November 1932, Ukraine was required to provide 1/3 of the grain collection of the entire Soviet Union. Entire Soviet Union, I wish I had the map up here, entire Soviet Union, and then one little country has to provide 1/3 of the whole thing. This is how it works. This is why they take out people like Samuel Dean, and they take out the industrialists, and they take out the so-called rich first. They take out the people who produce, and then to meet production, because it's like a psychopathic king, they demand more and they demand more for people who can't make more, and they just demand more. This is how it goes. It's parasitic and inherently destructive. It's a satanic mode of thinking. Communism is Satanism. In January 1933, Ukraine's borders were sealed in order to prevent Ukrainian peasants from fleeing to other republics. By the end of February 1933, approximately 190,000 Ukrainian peasants had been caught trying to flee Ukraine and were forced to return to their villages to starve. That's what they did. That's why I take this shit super seriously when they go into this guy's house and farm to raid his fridges and coolers. These same damn order followers that they did this in Soviet Russia, and they would do it here too, because it's the same mentality. The order follower mentality is just the same. It's just that the propaganda has not advanced so far that they're doing it openly yet. But the mental state of these cops out here is absolutely like this. Absolutely, they will do this. The collection of grain continued even after the annual requisition target for 1932 was met in late January 1933. So, even after all that, they got what they asked for, and they still took their food, and they still took them to starve, leaving them to starve. This is who we're talking about, right? And gleaning became punishable by death. What's gleaning? Gleaning is basically, after the harvest, you have leftover food that's not going to be used for anything, and they made it punishable by death for you to collect extra food to feed yourself. So this is the degree that they went to, is that everything was the property of the government, and you cannot even eat or you'll be killed. You had to work until you starve. And there was no revolution. There was no big revolution against this. It just went on, and it went on. And after World War II, there was actually a lot of communists sympathizing in the United States with the Soviets. So I hope you see how close this is. This is actually very close, because it's already beginning with the confiscation of food. Really, the FDA and all the food regulations already enable this. It already makes this possible. It is already red alert time. And within the first 5 months passage of that law, 54,000 individuals had been imprisoned under it, and 2,000 were sentenced to death. Now, the last story, the last article with the Time Magazine article with the Reekman family. I want to give some final words from the last story just to kind of tie this together. Farmers have always talked of looming disaster, but the duration and severity of the current crisis suggest an alarming and once unthinkable possibility that independent farming is no longer a viable livelihood. Small farms, defined as those bringing in less than $350,000 a year before expenses, accounted for just a quarter of food production in 2017, down from nearly half in 1991. This is how they do it. The entire profession of farming will disappear, and we're getting there. But the plot twist here, and of course there's a plot twist, I meant to be done with this, but I have to comment on it, is that in this article, you have the dialectic at work. It's bringing up a lot of truths, and I was like, truth in Time Magazine, that's a bit weird. But then I saw the other hand of what they were pushing. This article is a perfect example of what happens to anyone seeking truth and justice. And that article, the Time Magazine, here is actually advancing the agenda. And here's how they do it. You present a very real issue and call attention to it, which is what they did. That builds credibility, that builds trust. You tell things as they are, but without diving deeply into causal factors or big picture ideas. You don't go too far. You don't call them vultures and communists like I do. You perform the misdirection, and you present a solution that's actually the complete opposite of justice, which is what they did. So I'll quote from this article. Most family farmers seem to agree on what led to their plight: government policy. In the years after the New Deal, they say, the United States set a price floor for farmers, essentially ensuring that they received a minimum wage for the crops they produced. But government began rolling back this policy in the 1970s, and now the global market largely determines the price they get for their crops. Big farms can make do with lower prices for crops by increasing their scale. A few cents per gallon of cow's milk adds up if you have thousands of cows. Farmers say the best solution is government policy that cracks down on consolidation of the grocery stores and food processing facilities that buy food from farmers. Existing antitrust law would allow the government to prevent big mergers that mean farmers have fewer places to sell their crops and that supplies are more expensive. But those laws go largely unenforced, says Carstensen. Earlier this year, a Wisconsin congressman introduced legislation to put a moratorium on large food and grocery mergers. Farmers are advocating for better antitrust enforcement across the country. In October, cattle ranchers held a rally to stop the stealing, to urge Congress to protect family farmers from monopoly power. And in Vermont, dairy farmers have filed a lawsuit alleging that a conglomerate of milk buyers conspired to set low prices on milk. One category of small farmers is thriving on the current marketplace: organic farms, who can charge a premium of their crops and who can sell them locally. The article does say that organic is a way out for these farmers. They, of course, haven't gotten a cent of aid from the government. Reekman says, since the assistance goes to farms and the most farmland and animals, they don't get it. So they're not holding their breath that anything will change. I sometimes feel, says Mayor Reekman, like they're trying to wipe us off the map. And yes, they are. They're trying to wipe these farmers off the map. But they said a lot there. But in that article, they presented that the farmers want price floors back, which first is a misrepresentation. Which farmers? Who do they speak for? All farmers? And they're basically saying that it's ruthless competition that is making their job difficult, and not government regulations. They're saying that the solution to this is by stopping mergers and enforcing the antitrust laws, which is of course a joke, because those laws would only get enforced after, enforced against real producers like Dean Foods, and they would not get enforced against Dairy Farmers of America, because of course Dairy Farmers of America is not any kind of big monopoly, profit-hungry company. No, of course not. They're sustainable. So, they're giving you a misdirection here. They're giving you false solutions. And the reason I had to make sure to include this at the end of this very long episode is because it absolutely fits in with what is happening in Germany. And I said I'd comment on the Germany protests. And to make a long story short, it's not a genuine protest. It's not a genuine grassroots protest. The reason I say that is because it's organized by the union. It's the main farmers union over there. And if you look at what they're actually protesting about, they're not protesting about the government regulations or the taxes. They're protesting against the government pulling back a diesel fuel subsidy. Meaning that, for diesel, which is needed for the farm equipment, they pay a lower price than the average person, and that allows them to function. The government cuts their diesel price by half, and they've reduced that to 25%, and that's what the strike is about, the protests. And there's a big problem with that, because you're asking the government for help. There's no principle behind this, because in principle they should say, we will be fine, we will pay diesel however much it costs, roll back the environmental regulations, roll back your regulations, we do not need it, we will handle our own food, and we will really sell our own food. This is what they should be doing, but that is not what they're doing over there. Of course, this is the union organizing this protest, and the unions actually act as a anti-industrial revolution pressure group. They're just socialist pressure groups. Workers' unions are actually not in the interest of the workers long term. They're just in the interest of taking down the main producers, and really they're certainly accomplishing the same agenda as the ruling class behind governments. They're holding up, they're two pillars holding up the same roof. And what do these protesters do? Do they speak? Do they do anything significant? They block the roads. I have another problem with blocking the roads, because you're blocking movement, you're blocking transportation. And who are you actually hurting with that? You're not hurting any of the politicians. You're not, because they fly helicopters, and or they don't have to move. They can work. They can work through the screen. You're not stopping their movement. You're stopping the movement of people like you, of farmers, of people like me, that need to go see their families for those union interests. So that's why I'm not impressed with their performance. I'm not impressed with their protests. And I see that railroad workers and their union have joined the strike too, and they're protesting for longer hours and higher pay. So I think you can imagine how I feel about that. I think it's weak. I think it's soft. We should get paid what we earn, and that's it. I only want to get paid what I earn. I don't want any bonuses. I don't want overtime. But I do want for people to get their hands off my fucking money, and definitely they're gonna keep my hands off of my food, or they'll be gone, and worse. And thank you very much for spending this time with me, and that's it. There's a lot covered there. I'm definitely going to try to make these shorter, but It's a significant topic, and I really felt like I needed to talk about all that. You see how it all connected. It all connected with the dairy industry and the protests that are going on right now. This fits in with the environmental agenda, and the pandemic, because of all the sensitivity to disease now later on. You had the Freedom Convoy, now you got these strikes blocking the roads again, and you see those German protesters, they're aligned to like an opposition, very hard right-wing government. You know, all of these agendas are starting to fold into one. You see these guys, they're members of the same organizations. These people, you see the dairy industry, it's just essentially one big industry. It's amazing when you actually look this up, and you know, that was a surface level research compared to, you know, what you could do is dive in deep into this stuff and research it for 2 months. I only looked at this for a week, a couple of days, and this is what I found. This is how obvious it has gotten. And I'll end it by saying that. This is how obvious it is. And I hope it's also obvious to you how harsh I think the response should be. So once again, my salute to Amos Miller, and I'll see you next week on This Week in Tyranny.